I guess it would probably be best if you just introduce yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you'll do a much better job than I will.
I am Pamela Topjian. I am on the west coast of the United States, in case you end up having international listeners, which hopefully, right? Um, so I am a former nurse, and I quit nursing in 2020, and I am now a board certified hypnotherapist and a pet sitter, and I love it so much. I'm also a published author, and the first book I wrote was about a total mental breakdown that I had, everything leading up to it, the breakdown, and then the healing from it.
Right.
And then I wrote a second book about my nursing career.
Okay.
So yeah, that's who I am, and I'm happy to be here. So thank you.
Yeah, of course, and I'm happy to have you here. I really just kind of wanted to get to know you a little bit.
Hmm.
I guess maybe could we start at kind of talking about your kind of upbringing as a child.
Sure.
I have heard a little, couple bits and pieces, but
Uh-huh.
if you could just kind of go back to like what are like the moments that kind of really
Yeah.
everybody has their own like things, right? These are the
Sure.
the moments of my life that changed who I was, and whether
Right.
that be for good or bad.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. So my parents divorced when I was 9, and this was in the 70s. So there was no laws for deadbeat dads or anything like that. So my father was not involved in our life and did not pay any child support or any alimony, didn't help my mom out at all. And she had 3 daughters at the time. And so we moved around a lot. We were evicted some of the times. We were often hungry. Um, you know, so it didn't have like guidance or supervision or anything like that. My sisters were teenagers. I was only 9, so my whole life changed, and it was very difficult for me. I was alone a lot of the time too, and which beforehand I was like at my mother's hip. So that totally changed for me. But also, then my oldest sister, was killed in a car accident when she was 18, and that was just before I was 14. And so that was a huge, pivotal moment in my
Of course.
life. And then I also, then as a teenager, I had 2 separate date rapes that I survived. And let's see. And then that led to, well, I shouldn't say it led to, because it wasn't from the date rapes, but I was a teen mother as well. And then I had 2 toxic marriages and before the major breakdown. So yeah, so that's that's it in a nutshell before I get into my adult years.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. So, I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
and I would love to kind of like maybe kind of dig a little deeper.
sure.
Maybe starting with your parents.
Hmm.
So, I guess did you you said your parents divorced when you were 9. Did
Yeah.
you know your father very well prior to that? What was that
I would
relationship
say,
kind of like?
so he worked night shift. I think we didn't see him a whole lot. And like I said, it was kind of attached to my mother's hip. She was, before they divorced, she was a Sunday school teacher. She was a Girl Scout leader, and I was always with her. And then after they divorced, she had to work a few jobs in that. But I would say I saw him, but he didn't do family things with us, and there was a lot of yelling between them.
Hmm.
My mother would go out on the porch and she would smoke and she would cry, and I would go and sit with her. And so I wouldn't say I was close with my dad ever in my life. I kind of knew him. I did actually go to, this is, like I said, this is the 70s. So there were like picket lines, and he was very political. And I would go with him, or he would bring me with to some of these, and I would be like up on his shoulders. And I can't even tell you what they were for. But I'm just sure, I never heard that this was the case, but I'm just sure that my mother was like, if you're going to go off and leave me alone with these three girls, take one of them with you. And since I was the youngest, that was me. Since I was the
Right.
youngest, then he could just like, put me on his back or his shoulders or whatever, and I was probably, when you think about seeing somebody in those picket lines and that when there's a child around, is probably sort of made, got more attention for him to see a little girl up on his shoulders.
Right. Do you feel like a lack of kind of male, older, father figure,
Yeah.
kind of shaped, like, is there anything that you feel like you wish
Hmm.
that maybe, not necessarily that he did, but like more so for you, is there
Yeah.
anything that you feel like maybe at that time, maybe it's something that you found later in life, but maybe you just felt lacking a little bit growing up?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I 100% believe that the two toxic marriages that I ended up in was a direct result of not having a father figure in my life at all,
Right.
or knowing anything about what a good marriage relationship is, or
Right.
even how to stand up for myself as a female, as a woman. I think that it's very important to have, it does not have to be the father, but to have a father figure in a little girl's life, a little boy's too, but I can only speak for myself. But I
Right.
do think it's very important, and it does make a big difference if that is absent, if that is completely absent. So I also believe that some of the, I had, like I said, I had two date rapes in my teens. I think those kinds of things would not have happened if my father was involved in my life. And that's a lot to put on him. I know that's kind of heavy and really, like pointing the fingers. And I don't blame him specifically, but I do feel like it contributed to those awful things that had happened to me in my life by not having, an adult male figure for a little girl growing up. You
Right.
know.
And I don't think you should feel any type of shame whatsoever. I think that, like, I think you're like fully correct. And I mean, in terms of
Hmm.
like, it's so profound. I think,
Yeah.
to, to know what a stable relationship looks like, and to
Right.
know, like, I don't necessarily have that. And I was actually thinking,
Yeah.
prior to this podcast, I was like wondering like who in my family, like I might have like thought of as a stable relationship, and like
Yeah.
maybe one of my grandparents on my dad's side, but like
Yeah.
I didn't really, see a lot of stability in terms of like, the traditional nuclear family.
Hmm.
And I think there's
Right.
a lot of people that also, kind of have grown up, and I think I'm hoping that like over time that has gotten a little better. I think there was
Right.
definitely, I can't speak to any generation before the one that I grew up with, but I
Right.
definitely feel like there's maybe more of an emphasis on, or maybe just awareness because we have so much,
Yeah.
technology and discussion.
Right.
But this idea of just, having a very stable relationship,
Yeah.
and doing, doing things I would say the correct way, in terms of just
Hmm.
being able to facilitate a childhood for people that, that you put on this world.
Right.
It wasn't necessarily a priority. Even in my, I grew up, I was born in '89, but like even throughout the
Hmm.
'90s, it wasn't really a priority. And I dare say, still to this day, it's not really a priority the way that I feel like it should be. But
Right.
I would like to think it has gotten a little bit better. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very profound thing I think that you said, was that like, these things may not have happened to you if,
Yeah.
if you had grown up in a different home environment. And I think that's
Right.
a very, probably common thing, because I think there's a lot of people. Um, I can just think about like my own experiences when I was
Hmm.
dating, and in retrospect, like there was plenty of things, right, where I was just like, I met some people who like I had never talked to before. I started, online dating. That was
Yeah.
really what kind of like got me out of the house and really starting to meet
Right.
people. And so I definitely like met up with people that I talked to like the same day, and there was some girls that I met up with that like I picked up like just at the corner of a street, or we went to the beach at night. And like in retrospect, I'm like, that's horrifying, right? Like, I mean,
Right,
I
right.
would never ever do anything like that, but I just fear for
But just
women.
that they had put themselves in that danger,
Right.
and you realized later that if it wasn't you, they could have been in some serious danger. Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's the thing is I know they were also probably dating after that. So I mean, like, I don't
Hmm.
know. It's like, um,
Yeah, it's scary out there.
yeah. And I mean, I'm like, I am like many times very thankful that, like
Yeah.
that I am, I'm a man, so I feel a little bit more like I have, more
Right.
security, even
Hmm.
though I probably like even I shouldn't, right? Like that's you should never take for granted the fact that your security can always be at risk if
Right.
very easily somebody could have a weapon or something like that, and then
Oh, yeah.
immediately like that
Or accuse you of
puts me
something that you
right,
didn't even do, and it's your word against theirs. And yeah, who's gonna doubt that? Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I heard a statistic, or not a statistic, but where, they had polled men and women on dating sites and said, "What are you most fearful of?" And the men said they're most fearful of the woman not looking like her profile picture, and the women were most fearful of death.
Yeah,
You know?
I kind of knew where that was going. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
have you heard
Oh,
the thing
goodness.
about like I don't know exactly. I haven't really like read into it, but I've just seen people talking about like women saying like, would you rather be in the forest with a man or a bear?
Oh,
Have
right,
you
right.
heard
I've
that
heard
one?
that. I've heard that one, right. And
And
most of
there's
them
a lot
said
of
a
women that are
bear.
like, I would rather be with a bear. That's
Yeah.
yeah. And that
Oh,
is a testament, I think, to kind of like
yeah.
what like how badly
Oof.
like men represent other men sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like I mean it's just a a statistic that like if
Right.
you are a male you are more likely to commit crimes, you're more likely to
Mm-hmm.
do things that are it's just but yeah, so I also moved around a lot when I was
Mm-hmm.
younger. I can you give me like kind of a an idea of well I moved around a lot in the county, right? That was my thing. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know about you. I lived in so many different cities. By the time I was in, I think eighth grade, I had been to I want to say sixth grade. Sixth grade, I'd been to like 7 or 8 different schools, but
Oh
like
my
they were
goodness.
all
Yeah.
in the same county. But it was always like I still have to reset and like learn. Like
Right.
these are all the new people. Like, have you ever seen
Right.
Mean Girls? Fantastic
Yes.
movie. And it's like being like Katie Heron, right? You're coming into this like new situation. All
Mm-hmm.
these other people know each other, and
Mm-hmm.
you're just hey, I'm
Yeah.
the new
The new
person that you all
kid.
need to get to know. But then, like,
Yeah.
sometimes that it doesn't work out. It's like, all right,
Right.
nobody wants to talk to this kid.
So I didn't go to as many different schools as you did. I did change schools, every few years, I would say. Um, But for me, like we were so poor that like I only got a meal at school if I was lucky, if things were filled out correctly and stuff. A lot of times I didn't have anything to wear. I didn't have, new clothes, which, doesn't sound like a big deal, but when you're a little kid and everybody gets new clothes for school, it's a big deal.
Oh,
I
I mean,
didn't
and
have
kids are
that.
so brutal too. Like it's
Oh
like
yeah.
you have to like dress the part in order for people to accept you. And
Yeah.
yeah,
And
but go
maybe
on.
maybe more so for a little girl. I don't know, but I mean, I just think
Probably.
of all the little outfits that I wanted that I didn't get, and not to say that that's traumatic or a big deal at all, but it made me a little more shy at school. I didn't speak up. I didn't, I tried to just keep to myself, honestly. And a lot of times I didn't even go to school. It was a time before the internet, so I don't know if my mother even knew most of the time, but I would just stay at home and hide. And I know that sounds really strange to hear that I just would hide even when nobody was home. But I've
Mhm.
come to realize, so I've been through a year of therapy, but I've come to realize that doing that was just because I didn't have any stability or security, and I just wanted to be safe, and I just wanted to not be so fearful. So just hiding was kind of like making myself disappear. I wasn't suicidal as a child. I don't think I even knew anything about that, and we had lost a sister. I mean, I guess that was a little bit later, but, I kind of wanted to just sink into the background and disappear. So that's what that was like. But going to school, sometimes I would, and these things sound so crazy to think of now, but I would pretend to eat a lunch because everybody had their lunches. And if I didn't get a hot lunch, if I didn't have that free, service for me, then, I would bring a bag and I would just pretend like I was eating and like, just, and of course it was probably really obvious, but at the time I thought I'm just trying to
Yeah,
blend
I mean,
in with what
yeah,
everybody
you're
else is
trying to blend
doing.
in.
Hmm.
Um, what about your kind of relationship with your mother? I know you said that you were very close to her, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I was very close to her, and my two older sisters were 4 years and 5 years older than me.
Mhm.
So
Youngest.
they would be, they were teenagers, and they would always make her mad, and she would cry and she would yell. And I used to think because my father used to make my mom cry, and I would be the one to go outside and sit with her. I kind of made a little deal with myself that I was never going to make her cry and never make her mad. So I was very almost protective of my mother. And now she's in the early stages of dementia. But at the time, just growing up, I just tried to stay out of her way and or help her if I could. Um, we started out very close, but growing up, I can't say that we were just because she didn't have the time. When she was home, she was sleeping
Right.
most of the time. So and now that I've written the book, the memoir, she doesn't know about it, and I don't want her to know about it because I know that it would break her heart and she would feel guilty. There's a lot of stuff in there she doesn't know about, and she doesn't know how things had affected me and how, and just some of the things that had happened to me she doesn't know about. And I just don't want her to feel any guilt or any heartache for any of that, so
Yeah.
she doesn't know about that.
You mind if I ask you, like you said, your mother has dementia now. I mean, that's
Hmm.
definitely something traumatic that are
Yeah.
going through at the moment. I would assume, and
Yeah.
um, I I know my grandfather kind of had some memory issues before he passed
Hmm.
away. I wasn't really super close with him.
Yeah.
My mother was more so, but
Yeah.
can you explain what that's like? Because I know there are other people that go through that, and
Yeah.
I think it's a relatable thing for those people to know that there's
Absolutely.
somebody else that kind of goes through
Right.
that type of trauma.
Right. Yeah. So I talked to her. So she lives in another state, and she just recently moved in with my sister. And So I talk to her every Sunday on the phone, and we actually just came back from a trip from visiting, so we saw her. But she will tell stories that I know for sure are not true. Like she'll talk about when my dad died or when my grandma died, and different things about that, which I'm 100% positive I know the whole story. And her memories are just mixed up with other memories, and she'll just talk about it as if she's sure of herself, but it's not the truth. And it's not that she's lying, it's just her memories are jumbled up. So she'll talk about things and it's not right. We had visited her, like I said, and we went to visit other family, of course, and I was with my aunt, who's the same age, but she has no memory issues whatsoever. She's doing great. She's very sharp. But my mother said that my aunt had stayed with her for 4 years or something, and we all kind of looked at each other like we knew that wasn't true, So things like that, or like she said she was the last one there when my dad died, and that's totally not true. They had been divorced for several years, and she had lived in another state at that time, so that's completely false. Um, but sometimes too, like I can't tell her like things that are going on in my life because she won't understand it. So she probably has in her mind that I'm still a nurse, even though I quit in 2020. But so to talk about these other things that I'm doing, so like with the pets, like, because I'm a pet sitter and a hypnotherapist, and I do hypnotherapy kind of just really part time. The pet sitting I do all the time. So I can tell her about watching pets, and we have these very superficial conversations. So it's difficult to kind of keep a conversation going, because her memories are off. I can't talk to her about, I have a YouTube channel myself, and I do guided meditations. I do interviews like these with people with podcasts, and I do on my own channel as well, about holistic health and stuff. And I can't talk to her about any of that. She wouldn't really get it.
Right.
So it's really difficult just to hold a conversation about current events or your own life. Whereas it used to be, my mom would be, of course, really interested in my personal life, but not anymore because, there's nothing I could really talk about.
Right.
Um, so it is difficult. I think the harder part than that, that's a day-to-day thing. The harder part than that is not knowing, because with dementia and Alzheimer's, they can go downhill really fast, or it's a very slow, and you don't know which it's going to be. So, as far as their safety, that's something that's really concerning. And luckily she is with my sister, but hopefully my sister won't burn out from the constant having to take care of her, basically. She eats on her own, she showers and takes care of herself on her own, stuff like that. But you
Right.
never know if she's going to wander off and think she's going somewhere else or what.
Right. When I kind of look at you, I think you seem like you might be somebody who has like all the tools in terms of
Hmm.
like knowing how to handle these type of situations.
Hmm.
So I'm just wondering, like, how do you in your day-to-day life kind of find resolve with this? I mean, it's
Yeah.
for sure got to be a very difficult thing to deal with. I can
Yeah.
feel it for you, like, and
Hmm.
I can only imagine, like, like, especially like, I think like the person I love the most is my wife, and if
Hmm.
like she went through that, that would be such a a
Yeah.
struggle.
Yeah.
And so I mean, like, how do you kind of like go kind of go through life and find peace? I mean, there is a positive, obviously. It's like that,
Hmm.
she is here, and that you have the
Hmm.
opportunity to spend
Yeah.
that time with her. And
Yeah.
even what you said, I think was beautiful, was that, like, you can talk to her about pets,
Hmm.
and it may seem superficial, but that bond is real. That
Right.
that ability to kind of just have a normal conversation,
Right.
and just kind of maybe experience your mother like as you've always known her. It's
Yeah.
still there.
Yeah, so just being able to have that regular routine of talking to her on the same day, the same time every week, that's very helpful. Also, being in constant contact with my sister to find out how my mom is doing is helpful as well. But just, also giving up some control, because kind of being a nurse, kind of, it can be very frustrating if I start concerning myself about things that I have no control over, like her medicine and, her oxygen level and her doctor's appointments and all these things. She's in my sister's hands, who is not a healthcare worker, but she's older than me, and she has a really nice house, and my mom has her own room, and it's safe and everything, other than, like I said, if she walks out the door. um, so just being in constant contact with my sister, being able to give up control as far as her care is concerned, and just trying to treat her as, like you said, as my mother, and meeting her where she's at on these conversations, on these phone calls. But also personally, I feel like being able to talk about it with people is very helpful. If anybody has a parent that has dementia or Alzheimer's, or you're not sure, you can probably call their doctor and find out. Or if they're in a nursing home, make sure that you make those visits. And if you have any questions for their doctors or their care team, go ahead and ask them. And there's support groups too. I haven't had to have go through any support group at this time, but I know that they're out there if you need them. So I think that's really important, to be able to talk with others who can kind of relate with what you're going through with having a parent going
Yeah.
through that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there are groups and stuff. I'm sure like there are, where
I'm sure there
people
is.
can bond over that type of thing.
Also,
uh
I think it's important, like, so I keep telling my sister, and maybe this will happen down the road, because she hasn't lived with her even a year yet, just since about April or May or something. But there are, rather than like a whole nursing home situation, there are just like these day senior centers where they can go a couple times a week and spend the day. It's almost like daycare for seniors, but they have people come in to play the piano. They have, groups come in with kids that sing or whatever. They have different crafts and stuff for them. So just to kind of give, whoever is living with them, to give them a little bit of a break, so they can go off and do things that they know that they're not able to do while the parent is with them or at home, or even if they need sleep, even if you need to just sleep in that time. But just to make sure you set that up early before you absolutely need it, if it's at all possible, and it might not be possible for everybody, but I think it's great to have another place that the parent can go to to give the caregiver sort of a break. I think
Right.
that's really important too.
Right. And I want to thank you for kind of sharing that too, just because I know
Yeah.
it's one thing to talk about something that happened when you were a kid, but like,
Yeah.
it's obviously something that's still kind of present. Um,
Hmm. But you're
uh,
right. A lot of people are going through it, and it can be really hard on your mental health for sure.
yeah. You mentioned you had two sisters, so do you
Hmm.
mind telling me about your relationship with them?
Yeah, well, the oldest one had died in a car accident,
Right.
and she was 18, and it was just before my 14th birthday. So somebody in another podcast had asked me, was she like a mother figure to me? Because my mom wasn't around, but she was not. So like I barely knew her,
Right.
because both of my
How
sisters had, they were teenagers, and now suddenly they had no parents, so they just went off and did their thing.
right? How old is that? Sorry, what was the age gap there again?
So 5 years between my oldest sister and me, and then 4 years between the sister that's now living.
Right.
So 4 years older. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my age gap with my sisters is a little bit larger, but I can
Mm,
definitely like we kind of grew up like differently because
right.
we grew up in different phases of our life
Yeah.
and so yeah, I didn't really kind of make as much of a connection
Hmm.
as I could have and should have because we just weren't like in that same space. Like
Right.
I always kind of just they were the baby and I was just kind of the teenager trying to figure things out.
Yeah.
And then as I got older, it just kind of didn't
Right.
evolve that way.
Right.
Um,
My kids have 9 years apart. So I had a son when I was a teenager, and then 9 years later, or 8 years later, I was married, and then 9 years later, I had my daughter. So my kids are 9 years apart. Yeah.
right. So when your sister passed away, I mean, do you mind me asking kind of what happened? I mean, like I know you said it was a car accident. Was it
Yeah. Yeah, so actually my mother and I were invited to a campground with a friend of hers, and so we were away camping, and at that time no cell phones, no internet, nothing like that. So
right,
there was like a clubhouse for the campground, and I don't know how it happened, but my sister was in a car accident in the middle of the night. So it was like, midnight or 1 o'clock or something. So very early in the morning, my mother got a phone call at the clubhouse at the campground and said that she was in critical condition, which I don't think that she was. I think she was already passed, but they were just didn't want to tell her that on the phone. So my mom's friend drove us to the hospital. And when we got there, she was already gone. Like I said, I think she was already, yeah, now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure that they said in the medical examiner report that she died on impact. So she had passed right away.
right.
So yeah, so I mean, everything from that point on was like my mother was just sobbing, and my father was actually at the hospital, and it was strange to me because my mother and my father embraced at the hospital, and it was just very a strange sight to see. But one thing that had a huge impact on me from that day, other than my sister passing away, was my mom's friend said to me, now remember, this is just before my 14th birthday. I was at the hospital, my mother's sobbing, crying, my dad's there. I was just sitting sort of in a waiting area kind of, and with my mother's friend. And she pointed right at me and said, "You be strong. Don't you cry. You have to be strong for your mother." And that set a whole tone for me for the rest of my life. Like even now, I have trouble with emotions. So, don't you cry. You be strong. So that was the absolute worst thing to say. But
Yeah, that's what I was
um,
thinking, honestly. Like, it's just that, what
yeah.
I've kind of been trying to, I've been trying to figure out my own kind of, space and trying to get
Mm-hmm.
to like a place where I feel, kind of just okay with all the bad things. And
Yeah.
what I've kind of learned, I guess, from just like watching videos is that like if you try to suppress, one
Right.
emotion, you're gonna suppress all of them. There's no way to just, oh, I'm only
Right.
gonna bury happiness, or sorry, I'm only gonna bury
Right.
sadness, right?
Right.
But you're also going to bury happiness, right? You're
Yeah.
also going to bury all these, positive emotions because
Yeah.
you're just not feeling.
Right.
And
And those things will come out eventually anyway. And if it's not
yes,
mentally, it's physically. If you end up with a bad back, or you end up with even things like cancer or diseases or, addictions, I think these things come out because of stuffed emotions,
Right.
covering up those bad things that has happened in your mind, in your life, not being able to deal with it, not knowing how to deal with it, not ever being given any opportunity for any way to process through those things. It'll come up eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why. So in my second divorce was, that husband was physically abusive at the end, and so when I divorced him, I was suicidal, highly anxious, very fearful. I had a total mental breakdown. And I was so confused as to why this was happening. It's like I should be the happiest I've ever been in my life. I was free. I was nursing, so I didn't have to worry about money or a job. In fact, the money was going to be better without him. Um, so, because he wasn't always working consistently, and my income mostly was paying for us. So, having a job, a steady job, a good job, being away from him, it should have all been, yay now. But I had this huge breakdown. And so then I find out later, like almost a year after that, I went to therapy and all the childhood stuff had come up, which I never even thought about it being, she mentioned being neglected, and I never considered that I was neglected, but I was, and just, having the date rapes and being a teen mother, moving around a lot. So all these things in my childhood, once I was done with marriages and I was on my own, it was like I just totally just boom, it all fell on me at once.
Right.
So those things will come up, and I was already 50 years old at that time, and not even realizing that my childhood was really traumatic.
Right. And yeah, it absolutely was.
Yeah.
Regarding what you were saying about the divorce and
Uh-huh.
feeling like you should have felt happy but you didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you got like you check off like the things that we're told that we have to check off, like, oh, we have a
Mhm.
job, we have stability and
Yeah.
all that. But in terms of emotional relationships,
Right.
obviously, like you are now separated from this person that you spent this, you created you married them, so you must have had
Mhm.
some kind of affection for that person.
Yeah.
And also you had also had a divorce prior to that. So
Right.
what made you, I guess in both circumstances, like what made you think to yourself, like, I'm not doing better in this situation, I need to be out of
Right.
it?
So with the second divorce, it was very clear that first of all, it was a big mistake to get married because I got married less than a year after my first divorce. And so he had a lot of issues on his own. And I shouldn't have even, I don't know why I really married so quickly with him. He was somebody that I knew when I was much younger, and I was in a different state with the first husband, and we were divorcing. Um, and it was almost like some familiarity, somebody that knew me when I was younger, and not in this state, in this town that was basically my first ex-husband.
Right.
So I had married him quickly, and I found out pretty quickly he wasn't the same person he was when we were younger, and I didn't take the time to know that beforehand.
Yeah. I
And
think you
and
maybe might have fallen in love with who he was rather than who he
right, I didn't even
is.
know
If
who he was as a man. I just, it was just, oh, this is somebody I know, and it was somebody that I thought cared about me because they did when I was younger. So when I was a teen mom, he was there. He wasn't the father, but he was there, like, asking me about all the doctor appointments, making sure I had what I needed. He was very concerned and interested in the baby that I was having. So he was very caring at that time. So backing up to the first marriage and the first divorce, so he was very controlling, and it was just like one thing after the other. He was also very demeaning and very critical of everything I did.
right.
And in the beginning, so it just got worse and worse and worse over the years and over the years and over the years. And so finally, I went to nursing school, and it was kind of a touch of independence and a touch of confidence, and realizing that I could make it on my own and I didn't need him anymore. And my daughter was either starting high school or right around that age where she could be home alone a little bit.
Right.
Um, and so I just realized that it was, like I said, when in a marriage, when a marriage isn't well, there's always times before that you're like, this is the time I should have left, but you didn't. So then it's like, oh, this is the time I should, like, there's big major things that happen. It's like, I should have left then. I should have left then. I should have left then. So there's these big signs that, that you think about leaving. And then finally it all comes to a head, at some point. And so for me, it was after nursing school, gaining confidence, realizing, I didn't even want to talk to him or be in the same room with him with my children because he was so critical and controlling, and I didn't want them to see that.
Right.
And so it was more of, rather than staying together because of the kids, it was more like I had to leave him because of the kids. It was a big part of it. So, and to show my daughter that, it's not okay to be treated that way by your husband.
Right.
So,
And
so yeah,
that's
so
also very important. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so that's the first marriage, and we were married 15 years. And so my daughter was, 14 or 13, when I left him. But then, like I said, then it was just less than a year. So we had moved to Upper Michigan, and I didn't, even though I was there 15 years, you're always an outsider. It's the kind of place that's very close knit. It's a small area, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And so I always felt like an outsider. And like I said, with him being controlling too, I wasn't very much out doing my own thing very much. So then the second husband came into my life. We had reconnected through social media at that time, and he was just going through a divorce, and I was just going through a divorce, and he decided to move up there. And then we got married quickly, and it was all a huge mistake. But
Hmm.
yeah.
Um, Now, only if you feel comfortable talking about this, would
Hmm.
you be comfortable talking about like kind of your experience in terms of sexual assault? Not obviously talking about like, in-depth details, but like just kind of
Hmm.
what led up to those
Yeah.
circumstances. Like maybe like what were like kind of red flags that maybe you didn't know going into that that maybe
Yeah.
maybe other people should be aware of and
Mm.
thinking about.
Yeah, that would be good if I could tell you.
No, I mean
So
it's
the so with the two date rapes, I can't even say today what the red flags were other than just being alone with somebody that you didn't know very well.
right.
Other than that, and for the time, I mean, we were not, this was back in
Yeah.
the early
You
early
can't just like
80s.
Google somebody and be like, oh, who are they
Right.
friends with, and how do they act
Right.
online? And
Right, right. Um, so and we weren't warned about these things as much either. And that goes again without having a father and without having very much guidance or supervision from my mother. I wasn't warned about these things either. I didn't realize that it was such a bad thing to be alone with somebody that you barely knew. So that was with those two date rapes, that was about the only thing because they were both very kind and respectful and everything during the date. And then it's after the date for each one of them. And it was totally different. I mean, it was probably the same year. I was either 15 or 16, right around that age. And they were nice dates. But it was afterwards that they just attacked, sexually attacked me. And it is, so both of those are in the book, and I do describe them very graphically. So just a warning for anybody who might think about getting the book. And I know you mentioned we'll put the links below or whatever,
yeah,
but
and
those,
could you also shout out the name of the title?
yeah, it's I didn't come this far to only come this far.
Okay, you
So
got it
that's
on you.
yeah, and it's on Amazon, and it's
And then that's your
paperback,
other one too
obviously.
behind you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The nurse one. I did look
So
it up
this
on
one.
Amazon briefly. Yeah,
So behind the mask, gloves, and scrubs. This is all about my nursing career and why I left.
right.
So yeah, they're both in paperback, obviously, and on Kindle. But yes, so they're both very graphic, and so definitely not for anybody under 18 or anything like that. But
Right.
also, it can be kind of a hard read. The first one can be kind of a hard read, but I do also go through the healing, and it does get better. So
Hmm.
that's the whole idea of the book is to show that whatever you go through, it can get better. But so there was also then when I was about I think I was about 12, or it's about 12 years old, I guess, that I had a sexual assault from a 17-year-old. And he just he was a friend of, so I had a friend who had an older sister, and the older sister always had people over. It was kind of like a constant party thing over there. And my friend was my age, and the older sister, of course, was older. But so I was about 12, and then the 17-year-old was there, and I was just leaving, and he called me into the bathroom, was like, "Psst, come here, and he had never talked to me, and I knew him just from being there, but I didn't know him well, and I was like surprised, like, is he talking to me? And he pulled me in the bathroom, and he tried to sexually assault me, but I mean, it is considered sexual assault because he was all over me and everything, but I got
And
away
also,
before there was
you're
any rape.
12, he's 17. Like that's just
Yeah.
fucking. Yep.
I
Yeah.
know, it's so crazy to think, and to think too, like, on another podcast, somebody had asked me, did he end up getting married? Did he have daughters? Did he have children? I have no idea.
Mhm.
And that's scary to think. And if he did that to me, nobody
Yeah.
nobody does that to one person, right?
Right. Right.
So yeah, and he was only 17, so imagine, what happened as he grew up. I have no idea.
Mhm.
But yeah. But all of that is, yeah, very graphically detailed in the book.
Okay. Um,
Yeah.
so you said became a mother when you were in your teenage years. Could you kind
Yeah.
of tell me about that?
Sure. Sure. So I was 17, and it was with a boyfriend, so it wasn't through one of the rapes, which probably would have had a different outcome had it if it
Yeah.
was. But it just so happened, it was with a boyfriend, and we were the same age, and yeah, so my friend and I, we were sexually active, so we decided to go and get birth control, and we went to the place, and we actually both found out that we were pregnant when we went for birth control.
Right.
And she decided to, terminate the pregnancy, and I decided to keep the pregnancy. So,
Mhm. What was
yeah,
your feeling when you first found out? Were you excited
shock.
or scared or
Shock and
shocked?
fear.
Yeah.
I had no idea how I was going to tell my mother, I was the youngest in the family, as and at 17, I was still, kind of the baby of the family, and here I was pregnant. I didn't know if my mother would kick me out, because you
Mhm.
hear those stories. I mean,
Right.
it's a little different now, but
I
back
was going to
then,
ask how your mom reacted.
yeah, yeah. So she was very helpful. So she took me to the doctor right away just to confirm, even though I had already had a positive test. She's like, "Well, let's bring you to the doctor first and just confirm." So we did that, and being the age I was, it was all under her insurance for her work. So
Mhm.
my prenatal care was under my mother's insurance. So it's kind
Right.
of funny.
Yeah.
But so she was very, supportive, and we talked about, school, we talked about custody, we talked about my relationship with the boyfriend. So she was very, very supportive and helpful. But at the time, so before I told her, I had a plan in place. So my boyfriend at the time, the baby's father, had an older sister who had a couple kids and lived in an apartment, and so we had told her, and she was excited for us, but she was also like, if I was thrown out, I was going to be able to go live with her, and then I could help her with her children while I was pregnant and when I had my baby, until we decided, how we were going to go out on our own. So that was a plan. So we had a plan in place before I told my mother. And of course, she did not kick me out. So,
Right.
and the whole family was totally in love with my son because he was the first baby of that next generation. And,
Right.
it all turned out okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's great. I I was wondering, like, what would you say your relationship with your son is today?
Yeah, my relationship with my son is great. Actually, it's almost like we grew up together,
Right.
So we are very, very close. Yeah, I talk to him almost every day. Uh, he lives about 5, 6 hours away or so. So we don't see each other all that much, but we
Right.
could, you know what I mean? We could,
Right.
like a day trip or something if we needed to, or
Yeah.
or wanted to, or whatever. But I talk to him almost every day, and yeah, yeah, we have a very good relationship.
Yeah. Part of the reason why I was asking is because my mother was actually also a teenage mother.
Oh, uh-huh.
She got pregnant when she was 16, also had a baby when
Mm.
she was 17.
Mm-hmm.
Although she was one of the people that got kicked out.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
My
yeah. It
my
happens
grandfather
so
on her
much.
side was like, if
Oh,
you have the baby, you're not here, right? Like,
oh my goodness.
but all right, so I will kind of shift gears a little bit because I do
Okay.
want to talk about kind of how you got into hypnotherapy. I guess maybe
Yeah.
start with being a nurse, why you quit. Obviously you
Yeah.
have an entire book about it, so
Yeah.
for sure, more details to be found there.
Mm-hmm.
But like maybe give me like a summary.
Sure. So there's a lot of, first of all, there's a lot of corruption, a lot of unethical behavior and stuff with in anywhere in nursing. I noticed because I worked in several different modalities of nursing, several different types of nursing to try to find my where I felt like I fit. And everywhere I went, so nursing homes, home health, detox and recovery, everywhere you go, they're giving people medications that aren't prescribed to them. Everywhere you go, there are some staff, including nurses, including medical staff, that are stealing medications for
Hmm.
themselves. And there are patients that the facility will take in even though the level of care they need is higher than what we can offer. So
Right.
because they have good insurance. So the company, the facilities are trying to just get all they can in the way of money for these patients when they can't really give them the care that they really need. And
Right.
it's so hard to be a part of that. And also I've worked, a lot of 12 and 16-hour shifts. And in the nursing home, when you have 20 to 40 patients, sometimes I have arthritis in my hands, and I would come home from work, and my hands would be just throbbing and I could barely move them. So that's a big part of it too. I just couldn't physically do a lot of what I was doing in the beginning because it was so many hours and so repetitious.
Right. And
Yeah.
did you ever get like maybe a workers' comp type of claim or anything like that?
No.
Or yeah. And part of it is like you kind of have to prove too, like that, like that came from the job. I don't know.
Right.
And I don't know if there's as much, kind of awareness about it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think that as a nurse, I think it's important to say that for anybody who is a new nurse or in school for nursing or thinking about becoming a nurse, it's not all terrible. But you really have to be able to stand up for yourself. Think of yourself first. They want to try to almost guilt trip you into, you know, you have to do this for your other coworkers so they don't burn out, or you have to that they try to make you feel like you don't care about the patients if you're not, if you're going to refuse to do a 16-hour shift, or even a 12-hour shift. But self-care has to come first.
yeah.
And when you are a nurse, there's always going to be nursing jobs. Don't stay in a place that you are not treated well. Don't worry about leaving because they will make you feel guilty for leaving. you know so, you're going to leave all your coworkers with one less employee when we're already short staffed, that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
if they want to call you, they make it seem like, like the bosses want to make it seem like they're your buddy, and they want to call you. No, no, don't take that because you can't prove what they said to you. You have to have it in either a text or an email if they're trying to rope you into doing something that you shouldn't be doing, you
Right.
know. And that happens all the time. And refuse to work if you don't have what you need.
Yeah. And I imagine that like you're not going to be able to really do your job in a fulfilling way, in a way that, is even conducive to helping the patient if
Right,
you're
right,
not if you're burnt out, if you've been,
right,
working so much that, you have no sleep or,
right.
and yeah, I mean, I don't love the medical industry, many reasons why, but I
Right,
mean,
right.
it's also necessary, but it's just,
Yeah.
I feel like we could do so much better,
Oh yeah,
in so
absolutely.
many ways.
Absolutely.
But yeah, moving on to, I guess, hypnotherapy, kind of, how did you kind of get into that?
Yeah. So I was already 5 years into nursing and I was already burning out from it. And I was looking for a more holistic way to still be in a field where I can, help people. And so I went to this school that was for holistic health, to become a holistic health practitioner. And they had all different modalities. And you can kind of it was kind of like an intro to all different kinds of things, just to kind of find out about it, learn a little bit about a lot of things. And hypnotherapy was in there. And
Right.
I just realized how powerful it was. And I really fell in love with the whole idea and how, it's really just, talking to somebody, helping somebody relax. And if they get nothing else out of it, they're at least going to get some benefit of relaxing, which a lot of people, with high anxiety and depression and all kinds of things going on, they really need that. So I just really fell in love with hypnotherapy and then went down that road to become certified there. But because I was married, because of the marriage that I was in and the life that I had at that time, I wasn't able to quit nursing and go to hypnotherapy. So then 10 years later, I went to, I had already had my mental breakdown. I had already went through therapy. I started up nursing again. Mainly, I knew I didn't want to be nursing, but I mainly did it again to have some independence, and make my own money and that. And, but it was just as corrupt, if not worse. And I was starting to feel those feelings of anxiety and depression again. It's like, I'm not going there again. I'm not doing that again. I can't. And then I realized, and we don't even have time for it, but I have a story about it on my YouTube. But this tattoo here was part of a dream, which also where I was doing hypnotherapy, where I was kind of asking about what can I do for my life's purpose? What can I do? And hypnotherapy came to me in the dream along with the tattoo, but that's a whole nother thing. But
Right.
so then I looked for hypnotherapy schools in my area. I did the whole course again, became certified, took the test, and became board certified. And it was 2020, so things were starting. So I started the hypnotherapy the second time, the courses in 2019, not even knowing what was going to happen, in
Right.
2020. And so because of the pandemic, we were able to take clients through Zoom in our class. So in the classes, you have to have 100 hours of hypnotherapy with the public, just, free hypnotherapy, just practicing with the public. So because of the pandemic, we were able to do that through Zoom. And I just had my days were full. I just did, hypnotherapy after hypnotherapy, one client after the other through Zoom. And it was amazing. So that's how I got into it then. And so then after 2020, then 2021. So I had done some pet sitting before that. And then I had a friend that was a pet sitter. And in 2021, she was starting to get really, getting a lot of requests and that she couldn't fulfill and asked me to step in for her. And then, so I did that. And then I started doing a lot more pet sitting. I just kept getting a lot more requests. And a lot of the hypnotherapy that I do through Zoom, I could also do where I was pet and house sitting. So it kind
Right.
of worked well together. But the pet sitting was supposed to be the side thing, and the hypnotherapy was my main thing. But it's turned around to where hypnotherapy is more of part-time and kind of on the side. And I do so much house and pet sitting. I'm gone more than I am home. So.
Right. Can I ask you, for people who may not know really what hypnotherapy is, if
Yeah,
you could go into detail a little bit about that? See, when I think
sure.
about like hypnosis in general, I always
Yeah.
think about like, TV shows and,
Right.
it's like, oh, you're a chicken and now you're going to be
Right.
clucking, clucking. And so I would like to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
I'll admit I'm a little bit like of a skeptic about like kind of
Mm-hmm.
all things spiritual. I don't really like, I think of like healing crystals, especially like
Yeah.
when people say holistic medicine, but at the same time, I am open to like, the overall idea. I do think that there are natural, things in the
Right.
world that just naturally make you better. Right. Like,
Right.
and I've tried in my past, trying to hypnotize myself and
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if you could just kind of maybe describe what it is and
Yeah. So I have a bunch of guided visualizations and guided meditations on my YouTube channel, which is just my name, just Pamela Topjian. So, it's very much like a guided meditation where I just talk people down into a relaxed state. So we relax your body. And then that once you get into that state, it's almost like a dream state, or just before you fall asleep or just before you wake up. And so the regular conscious mind chatter isn't going on as much in your mind. And so you're more receptive to focus with your subconscious mind to whatever you need to do, whatever your goal is. So whether it's quitting smoking or losing weight, which is kind of the usual things, or reaching any kinds of goals, building up confidence or getting rid of some of those, that negative self-talk that a lot of people have when they try something new or when they're thinking about something new. So sort of like self-discovery, bringing out your own self-confidence and bringing out your best self, kind of, or like I said, getting rid of some of those unhealthy habits too. So we just talk you down into a relaxed state and quiet the conscious mind, and we help the subconscious mind focus. Now, I will say that it's not for everybody, and a lot of hypnotherapists will say that it will work for anybody and it's good for everybody. I don't agree. I don't think that, everybody, that any one thing is good and helpful for everybody. There's not one thing that is good for everybody.
right.
So yeah, it feels like a guided meditation or a guided visualization if you've ever done any of those. And if you haven't, I have a bunch on my channel,
Yeah.
but you can find a bunch of others on, there's a ton of them on YouTube, all over YouTube.
Right. And
So
then there was another thing I think I saw on your YouTube that was about
yeah,
tapping. I actually
yeah,
just I was just watching like a different interview with somebody else, which
uh-huh,
kind of like a profound interview for me, just to kind of like try to understand myself a little bit. And then
yeah,
he mentioned tapping and the effects of that. And then
yeah,
again, I'm still a skeptic, but like like
mm-hmm.
so much of that interview, I was just like, this person gets me, right? And so it's just like
Nice.
when somebody does that, then that's when I'm like, okay, well, maybe I should be more exploratory. Maybe I should be,
A little
maybe
more
I should be,
open to
yeah, I
just,
should
yeah,
know at least what these things are, right? So could you
yeah,
maybe explain, tapping and
yeah.
I've heard that can also be helpful for people who experience trauma.
Absolutely. And again, not for everybody, but it's worth a try because it's completely non-invasive. If you don't get anything out of it, the only thing you've lost is your time.
Right.
But I
And that
do,
yeah, I mean I definitely believe in trade-offs, and part of
yeah,
like, especially when I think about like anything along this line, I think of like, it's really like, what is the worst thing that happens, right? Like if you
right.
ask me to okay, you're gonna lose 100 pounds, but you need to drink this mystery liquid, I'm not gonna do it. But if you
Right, because
say
who knows what's in it.
but if you say like every day drink a bottle of water, you'll lose 100 pounds. Okay, why
Yeah,
not try it? Like, why? Because the worst thing
right.
that happens is you drank a bottle of water every day, right? Like,
Right, right. Which has other benefits. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right. Or
Yeah,
if you listen to this person talk at you, with your eyes closed for, a half an hour or whatever, what's that going to hurt you?
right, right. So I didn't
You'll
mean to
probably
interrupt you, but that was a
No,
thought
that's
I had.
okay. So with tapping, it's it's emotional freedom technique. So EFT is what it's called, but it's really known in the world as tapping, and it's along meridian points in your body. And so when I first heard about it years ago, I thought, well, you're just saying affirmations, and the tapping is just giving you something to focus on. It's like, whatever it is, I deserve peace and freedom in my life. I deserve peace and freedom. And you're just saying the same kind of affirmations over and over. And I
Mhm.
thought that tapping was kind of a distraction to get you like to say, okay, I'll do this. I'm going to tap here and say this. I'm going to tap here and say this. It's under here. I'm going to tap here and say this here under your eyes, your chin, under your nose. But I've learned recently that it is more of the meridian points in your body that help where again, we're getting real woo-woo here, but it's where the energy flows. And I think it has more to do, on the more medical side, it has to do with like your your cerebral fluid, the fluid that's within your blood system as well, tapping in these areas where you have pressure points and things, that's going to make more of an impact than just tapping anywhere and saying these things, or just saying like the affirmations in the mirror or something like that. But you can become like completely certified as in EFT, and I'm not. I did have a class and a course in it, but I don't have any kind of special certifications in it. But it is
Um,
something that I will bring up to my clients. A lot of the hypnotherapy clients, we will talk about other things as well that can help them, in between the sessions.
so I was wondering for like something like tapping, like,
Mhm.
is it something that anybody can do for themselves, or do you
Oh,
like really need
absolutely.
to like, become certified, or do you really know how to do it, or go to a professional?
No, you can absolutely, because again, you're not going to hurt yourself by tapping in the wrong place.
Right.
So you can absolutely do it on your own. And like you said, you saw it on my YouTube, and that's just a very, very basic explanation of it. But it's all over, just like anything else, all over YouTube. You know, you can find tutorials on how to do tapping for yourself. And absolutely, I think that if anybody tells you that you have to see a professional to do it, you're going to miss out on a lot, because it's something that you kind of want to do. Okay, every morning when I wake up after I shower, then I'm going to do my tapping,
Hmm.
or just before bed or whatever, like have a routine where you're doing it, often and regular until you start feeling the benefits.
Right.
So it's absolutely something that you want to do on your own. But I would suggest, if you're not satisfied with, or you can't find what you're really looking for on YouTube or something like that, then go to a professional, have them do it on you, have them teach you how to do it, and then you can do it on your own. But it's definitely the kind of thing that you want to be able to do on your own. And like I said, if a professional is telling you that you have to go to them every time to do it, then they're wrong. you
Right.
know, and the same with hypnotherapy. In all my sessions, I'll say, and this, you will continue to feel these benefits, throughout all the days and nights to follow, as long as necessary. And so we want to get people to where, it's holistic and it's within themselves. It's not necessarily from somebody else, like I am a guide to guide you within yourself to find your own answers and your own solutions. I'm a facilitator. I'm not the professional that's doing something to you.
Right.
I'm, helping you to find it within yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
And you were talking about kind of affirmations, and I was
Yeah.
thinking like, I did see that you had one video basically kind
Hmm.
of saying that, it's better to say, I am ready for this, or I'm deserving of this, than to
Hmm.
say I am this.
Yes.
Um, in general, like my thing about affirmations is I feel pretty stupid, like looking in the mirror and just being like,
Yeah.
I'm talking to
Yeah.
myself, right? Like,
I
and,
know.
and, and like, how do you get over that? Like, kind of,
So the more that you do it, the more you'll get used to it. But it is feels strange. I mean, and even just talking into a computer, like it took me so long to feel comfortable talking to, like if you're talking and giving information, for the YouTube channels, or recording something, and nobody else is there. It feels just as weird as doing it in a mirror. Um, so it's just, the more you do it, the more you're going to be comfortable with it. But I think too, once you start seeing some benefits, then you'll be like, oh, wow, this
right,
stuff is really working. But that's the thing too. I think you have to be really aware of, like, oh, this thing has shifted for me, or I feel differently about this now, or find myself reacting different to whatever it is, to realize that it was either the affirmations or the tapping or whatever it is.
right. Um, there was one other thing that I saw that you said at one point you were working, I think, with people who were in like detox and recovery.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what that was like? I mean, I like it.
Ugh.
There's got to be a lot of feelings, right? Like,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
obviously like you got a lot of personalities, so for sure there's always going to be, I've never, been to, rehab
Mm-hmm.
or anything like that,
Mm-hmm.
or any type of real like recovery program per se.
Yeah.
I've gone to like some AA meetings, but like,
Mm-hmm.
not nothing to the degree where people are still actually actively kind of like, maybe in a
Detoxing.
cycle
Yeah.
of, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So, uh, well, it's very difficult, and I think that people don't realize how much the people in recovery, the people trying to recover, the people trying to get, so-called clean. Um, it's very, very difficult for these people, and they work so hard. They get so sick, and it's just such a struggle. It takes so much courage and so much dedication and determination to get to a place of not using. And the world just, the rest of their life, because likely they come to that point when they likely have ruined their life and ruined their relationships and, different job opportunities. And a lot of people even have criminal records now because of using whatever it was. And they will always have that in their background. And so
Right.
even to become completely sober, the world is against them for the rest of their life. And it's so terrible because most average people don't have the courage and the strength that people who have been through recovery have. And I
Right.
think that's so important for people to know, because you're never going to find somebody stronger mentally than a completely sober person who's been through recovery.
Right.
So that's one big thing I took away from that. And, and you're not supposed to really say that relapse is expected, but it is. So if you try and you relapse, not to give up. I mean, it's like 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, and
Right.
then 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. And it's a lot of dedication. Like I said, it takes a lot, but it's worth it in the end, and don't expect that you're just going to be a one and done thing. Most people go through these recovery treatment programs or go through different ones multiple times,
Right.
and that's okay. It's okay, because each time you go through one, I was telling this kid that was in one night. It's like going through a labor. It's like going through labor, that each of these labor pains is one step closer to a new life. And you just have to keep that in mind as you're going through it. But working in it, it was the same thing as working anywhere else. You have your higher ups in the facility, in that business, that are treating it like a business, and the money is more important than the actual patient care.
Right.
And it's so heartbreaking. And these people come in sometimes and they need, again, like I've said before, they need a higher level of care than what we have to offer, but the company is taking them in, and they end up, almost worse off because
Right.
they're not getting the care that they need. And then it's bringing the whole place down. So if you're in a facility that has, usually those are smaller facilities than like a nursing home or something, you have like, 6 to 10 people or something at most. But then it brings the whole community down when you've got one patient that is, just really going through it and needs, has more issues going on than just the drugs or substances.
Right.
So it's really hard as a nurse to go through that, and then having, your medical director telling you to give them this medication, even though the doctor hasn't prescribed it for them, because they think, oh, they're going to prescribe them that, but since they don't have it yet, let's go ahead and give it to them.
Right.
I'm not
Yeah.
for that. I don't agree that that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's a really hard place to be in too, because
Hmm.
you have this authority figure telling you to do something that doesn't align with
Yeah.
your ethical values, and
Yeah. Not
uh,
only my ethical values, but it's my nursing license could be taken away for giving a medication that's not prescribed. I
right.
mean, that could be my license.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say that you have like any type of advice that you would give to maybe somebody who's struggling, maybe somebody who's never been into rehab or anything of that nature, or like, a recovery program, or,
Yeah.
maybe somebody who has and is going through it, kind of in and out?
I think that if you've been through a recovery program and it worked and you ended up relapsing, later on, or if you liked that recovery program, it's okay to try again. Don't put yourself down for having to go back.
Mhm.
Also, like you were talking about, have an open mind about trying some of these different modalities. They may seem really out there, but it's so non-invasive. It's not going to hurt you. Different sort of, like you said, energy work or the tapping or the affirmations or hypnotherapy or Reiki, or there's all kinds of different things. If you have an opportunity, look into it, learn about them and try some of them. If you, like I said, if you have the opportunity, try some of it. It's not going to hurt, and it may very well just help you. Um, Also, know that people are out there. The whole world isn't against you. There are people out there like me who are rooting for you, and know that it takes so much strength and courage and determination to make it actually to full recovery. So there are people on your side. It can feel like the world is against you, but not necessarily. But to find a support system too, I mean, there's several recovery podcasts and YouTube channels as well. Find some of those that you can resonate with, whether or not you go to any treatment center or not, or whether or not you go to any meetings or anything like that, or any, support groups or anything. Some of those recovery podcasts and YouTube channels can be helpful as well, because it might just be one thing that just makes that switch for you. You just don't know. So just don't give up on trying. There is always hope, and there are people on your side.
Right. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for, sharing your story, for, coming on here and, kind of
Yeah.
sharing your expertise as well. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean,
Thank
thank you
you.
again. And I hope you, have a great day.
Thank you. You too. And good luck with all of this. I love what you're doing. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been great. Thank you.